Hi Tony, thanks for posting. I see that a number of your images have issues with exposure, and then also you have some labeled incorrectly. So let's take a look. I want to encourage you to ask questions if you have any questions after looking at these, but also that you can make revisions before posting to your milestone submission. So first let's look at your shutter speed. First you have them labeled backwards. So this one would be your long shutter speed, which is the same as saying a slow shutter speed. So the shutter is open for a longer duration of time. This one would be your fast shutter speed or your short duration shutter speed. It's open for a shorter amount of time. So this image is dark and this one is light. So this one is underexposed and this one is overexposed. You read your meter to make sure that you get a good exposure. So what I want you to also note is the frowny face. So you want to get the smiley face like what you have down here. So here first you have underexposure, which means that your meter would have been somewhere in here. You need, if you're underexposing, to add light, and you can add light by using a slower shutter speed. You can add light with a wider aperture opening, and you can add light if you have to with a higher ISO number. With this image, you're going really, really fast, which means you're subtracting a lot of light. So you can get a stop motion image with a fast shutter speed that isn't quite this fast. And what I want to reference here is this image. Here you stop the motion. This would be that short duration shutter speed with a 1/1000th, which is really fast, but not nearly as fast as a 1/4000th. So this would be an appropriate approach to what you were trying to do here, and in that 1/1000th you had a proper exposure. So here you needed to add light to get on that 0, and with that meter, that's always what you want to make sure that you have your meter set to that 0, and that if you're underexposing, then you add light, and if you're overexposing, then you subtract light, which brings us to this image. Here you're overexposing, which means you had too much light coming into the camera. It also looks like you may not have stabilized your camera with a tripod. We see a lot of shutter shake. So you need to stabilize the camera. Your shutter speed here is too slow with what we needed to do. So a 1/6 of a second, while you're correct, it is very slow, and it would record motion blur. It would record too much for this situation. So we want to go fast enough that we stop the motion of the girl, and slow enough to where we record the motion of the pinwheel, which would be somewhere around, say, maybe 1/50th of a second. Here you're closer at 1/15th, it's slightly faster, but we can still see that it's too slow. This exposure actually looks like it might be pretty close to being correct, but the issue is that you may not have stabilized your camera with a tripod, but I think you did, but definitely too slow. So try maybe a 1/40th, a 1/50th, somewhere around there, and see if you can get the girl to be in focus, the pinwheel to blur, to get a correct exposure and make sure that you have that smiley face. The next one is correct. This is a good representation of a wide aperture. I'm glad to see that you labeled them correctly, with the smaller number being labeled with the wider aperture and the smaller aperture opening being labeled with the larger number. This is a good representation of both the wider aperture and the faster shutter speed. Let me know if you have any questions.